Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for making into the session. So we are, my name is Ricardo Antuna. I'm with Wise Technology, the market leader in cloud client computing. And we have been quite thoughtful about, this busy week you're going to be here during VMworld and trying to avoid flipping PowerPoint. So you're going to see a theme on all the Wise sessions being panels, right? So our intent is to look into addressing, big questions, right? Major questions in the context of desktop virtualization and cloud client computing, right? And also try to bring, our customers and our partners on panels to be able to answer your questions and give you different alternative perspectives on these issues, right? So today the main topic is TCO, right? Total cost of ownership on doing desktop virtualization. So a lot been said about that, right? And there's still a lot of people in the industry who do not believe on this, right? And although there's thousands of customers who are implementing it, right? So we wanted to demystify the concept of the challenges and questions around TCO, and for that we put together an amazing panel with customers and partners. I'm going to let them introduce them in a few minutes. Two other actions and for you that you need to forget, and I'm being told has to be said, is one is you need to fill your response, and feedback on the session. I guess it's done online. And the other important thing, you should have received a little ticket with a number, and at the end of this session, we'll be giving away an iPad that is going to be preloaded with Wise's Pocket Cloud. It would allow you to connect to VMware View and access all your virtual desktop sessions in your data center. So with that said, we're going to get started. So a quick question, just quickly, so to set the context for the panel. Raise your hand if you're already doing desktop virtualization in any shape or form. Okay, very good. I would say it's, a majority of hands raised. So obviously you're probably in different phases on this journey, on this evolution. So hopefully, different topics will be addressing your needs at this point. So without any further ado, let's get started with the introduction. So for all the panelists, if you can say a little bit about you, your company, if you can share a little bit about, I would say high level at this point about where you are on VDI, what type of users, et cetera, et cetera. Thank you.
I'm John Brown from CA. I'm a director for infrastructure engineering. We started out with a 250-seat POC about 9 months ago that turned into a 500-seat production VDI deployment. So we're looking to deploy in the next year about 2,000 VDI seats. So that's kind of where we are right now.
Hi, everybody. My name is Ife Ojudiku. I work for CA Technologies. John Brown is my manager. And in addition to the POC that expanded drastically, we also have a show that we put on every 18 months, very much like VMworld, CA World. And there we have similar challenges, registration, press, etc. And we took a leap of faith on desktop virtualization this past May, and it paid off really well. The registration press serve functions were effectively addressed with a combination of VDI and Wise terminals. So these are some of the things that we hope to share with you, and hopefully you leave with our unique perspective. Thank you.
John and Ife, before Aditya, sorry for interrupting, can you give a little more insight into what products from VMware, server structure, storage?
Okay, sure.
Just high level, okay?
Okay. As with any VDI infrastructure, yes, you will have unique needs for storage. We've done, at CA World, like I talked about, we did storage with EMC's Clarion, VMware View 4, and Windows 7 virtual machines. So that was the technology stack that we deployed with. And on the compute side, we used Cisco UCS hardware. So a lot of brand new cutting-edge stuff that we, quite frankly, took massive leaps of faith with, and it paid off very nicely, I think.
And the Wise V10Ls.
And the Wise V10L terminals too. Yes, let's
Thank
not
you.
forget that. Thank you.
You forgot the most important product. Okay. Aditya?
Hi, I'm Aditya. I take care of IT at Wise, and we currently have, I'd like to say, achieved full virtualization in VDI inside on the LAN side, including R&D and development. Our eyes are not set in getting more virtualization with virtual desktops into the field for the mobile sales force.
Thank you. Mark?
Yeah. Hi, folks. My name is Mark Margavagis. I'm an analyst with Gartner Research. I am not here talking about products that I've implemented. My value in this panel is to give you an idea of what customers are telling us. On an annual basis, I'll speak to over 1,000 unique customers about what they're doing with desktop virtualization. And one of the areas that I focus on is an area of how to best pay for, what's the TCO, what's the economic argument behind this technology. And so hopefully during the next hour, we'll give you some ideas of what customers are telling us, as well as some things that remain a challenge.
Perfect. Wes?
Hi, I'm Wes Baker. I work for Jewelry Television. We sell loose gemstones and jewelry and kits on the television, online. I'm the virtualization architect there. Our VDI implementation started out about 3 years ago with the call center. We needed something a little more flexible than what we had currently were using, so we went with, at the time, VMware VDM. It's now View. The Wise V10Ls, that worked beautifully in our call center. It actually just worked. One of the easiest implementations I've ever had to do. Currently, I'm trying to get VDI through the rest of the departments. Not everyone is ready to embrace it yet, but we all know how that goes. So that's basically where we're sitting right now. We're constantly evolving, but that's about it.
Joe?
Hi, my name's Joe Blank. I'm with Blue Cross Blue Shield of Kansas City. I'm the lead systems administrator there. We essentially have been charged over the server infrastructures now, as well as our VDI environment. We started VDI back in 2007 before they even had brokers, things of that nature, to replace our external user work-at-home community from Citrix over to VMware one-to-one workstations. And we are about 80% virtualized now on our desktop side. We have a large implementation of P20s. We utilize part of the desktops are using P20s out on the actual workspace, but we also using a large amount of those P20s in our alternate workspace, which is essentially if our main locations go down, those people will be shipped over to another location.
Thank you, Joe. Carl?
Yeah, my name is Carl Eschenbach, and I'm responsible for VMware's global field operations. So I own everything outside of R&D and marketing at VMware, so I'm responsible for the go-to-market strategies. And I've been fortunate enough to spend a lot of time with customers over the last couple of years, specifically talking to them about their journey that they're embarking upon for end-user computing. We no longer, as you'll see this week, we'll continue to talk about specifically VDI, but we'll frame it in and it'll be focused on the end user as the asset that we all need to support in the future.
Thank you, Carl. So as you can see, we have interesting panel covering healthcare, covering retail, covering high-tech companies, different types of implementations. After we go through the panel, we're going to open up for questions, right? So you get to ask your own questions. So before we keep going, it would be good to level set expectations about TCO and VDI. If we can ask Mark to give us the Gartner point of view.
Sure. So total cost of ownership is an area of looking at the financials associated with owning and operating any given platform. And so this is dealing with only the cost side of the equation. So as we go through the conversation today, bear in mind that there's also a another side of the financial equation that matters, and that is the ROI. What's the return of that investment? For the sake of the conversation today, we're not explicitly talking about ROI, but this is TCO. And I'm sure it'll get mixed up along the way, but fundamentally, when you look at TCO, it's just the cost side of the equation. When looking at TCO, there are 4 components that you need to be mindful of. Costs associated with capital infrastructure, costs associated with technical support, costs associated with administrative support, and then fundamentally the area that tends to get forgotten the most, but is the largest component, and these are end-user operational costs. These are the things that users do and need to activate on their environment so they are a productive individual. So when you have things like PCs that are constantly rebooting, it's a sap on productivity. That costs the organization. So when you look at the TCO of desktop virtualization, and in particular VDI, we have a good story to tell. That when you look at the TCO comparisons of traditional PC computing to that of hosted virtual desktops, or VDI, what we're finding is that you'll save somewhere between 2 and 15% over PCs today. And I say specifically today because most organizations are doing their hosted desktops as a physical to virtual kind of migration. What those costs don't include are some of the enhancements that we think are on the way in the areas of things like profile management, better deduplication technologies, better ways to do high availability, things that will further drive down costs along the line. And so there's a huge amount of euphoria over desktop virtualization today. We know that the numbers are good. They're going to get better. Our belief is that when you look at the TCO, bear in mind that it's only part of the cost model, or the financial model, and that you really need to look at other things too. ROI is a big deal. Most customers that we speak to also focus on one particular component of TCO, and that has to do with capital infrastructure costs. The problem that most customers struggle with is how do you afford doing VDI? That when you look at the cost of infrastructure for servers, for storage, for networks, for licensing, those things add up. And oh, by the way, you still need a device, whether it be a thin client from Wise or an old PC. But fundamentally, you're adding to the cost more than what a PC would cost on its own. And so if your argument to invest in hosted desktops is predicated solely on the idea of saving capital investment, it's a very tough argument. Our guidance to customers is that when you look at the TCO of a given platform like VDI, you better be able to articulate value and propositions around support, serviceability, maintenance, and most certainly end-user productivity. These are very real. They matter a lot, but unless you quantify them, many times selling them and ensuring success is going to be a much more difficult thing to do.
Thank you, Mark. For any of the ones who are, hands-on implementing and maintaining this, any reactions, any comments, support, disagreements on Mark's point of view? Who wants to take the lead?
Yeah. I agree with you 100% on the total cost of ownership, not just the return on investment. One of the biggest savings that we saw immediately when we first implemented to the call center was the tremendous drop in support that our service desk was having to do, that the server admins and everyone in the engineering department was having to do to just to maintain it. The Wise V10L thin clients, we've got the Wise Thin OS on those. I mean, that's zero maintenance. That never breaks. We've not had a single failure out of the 350 original thin clients that we got. We had one power supply go bad, but the call center just works great now. Very efficient.
Wes, if you can share more details, I'm lucky to know your deployment and the benefits you got, but you had some statistics about the number of support calls before VDI, number of support calls after VDI.
The system that was in place before, the engineers and the service desk both that supported the system, it was a weekly battle. The support engineers would be in the call center 2 or 3 times a day supporting the system. The service desk was constantly getting calls, needed user profiles deleted, sessions killed, things like that. As soon as we implemented VDI twice in the last year, is the only time I've spent in the call center. The service desk has had 0 hardware calls at all. And the service desk is also able to reset a user's desktop system now without having to go to a on-call admin.
Thank you.
So
thank you.
I'm sorry. Yeah. So one of my earliest experiences with the Wise terminals when we put them out was it frying the device, and the only reason it got fried was not because the device was bad in any way. I had plugged the wrong brick into it, and out it went. Now, when that happened, of course, I'm thinking, okay, now I'm totally done, right? And then I realized, wait a second, no. Throw another one in there, plug it into the network, it finds the view server, and all in all, I'm back operational in like 5 minutes. And right there was when I really realized that, okay, this is definitely the way to go. Now, keep in mind, this same environment that I'm talking about, I had pretty much set it up together, but it took that experience for me to really realize, how much this was going to impact end user productivity. I mean, I like to think a lot of folks in the audience are folks who are intimately involved with supporting end users, and I'll just put it out there. One of your end users fries a laptop. How much productivity, how much downtime are we looking at? Think about it. Days, at least a day, depending on how quickly the request gets into IT and the machine, similar hardware gets found and all that stuff. So you're looking at least 1 business day, and 1 business day of lost productivity. That's a lot. And so when you look at the combination of the Wise terminals and VDI specifically, and so long as the conversation is about end user productivity, I think you definitely have a winning combination there. But I'll let John talk a little bit more, share his perspective on that.
Let someone else talk.
Okay.
People fighting for them. Joe, go ahead.
So our experience has been pretty much what Carl was talking about a little bit before about focusing on the user, and our initial problem with back in 2007 2008 with VDI was more the takeaways to virtualization with multimedia and peripheral redirection and things of that nature. That's why when we got the P20s, those really helped out in those areas. With the Teradici protocol, we're now able to give that full featured desktop to the user without those takeaways. At Blue Cross, it's very hard to take away anything. It's like, once they have it, they expect it. And so they didn't care about, okay, I can bring it back up in 5 minutes in another location. They expected that anyway. So whether it was a physical desktop or a virtual. So that's probably the big thing that we gained. Also from the fact that this year we've moved our call center, are in the process of actually doing a day where we'll actually do the entire call center at our alternate workspace, live calls for the entire day. And we would not be able to do that without really leveraging this technology. So from the executive side sees the huge benefit of that because, it's big dollars lost if we can't answer those phones each day. So,
John, were you trying to say something earlier?
Well, was there any network effect using PC over IP? Because that's the big negative that I've heard, and I know VMware's working on things to lower that. But we're in the same boat. We do all of our training through Flash, so and we use a Cisco soft phone. So I just wondered if you had.
On the soft phone, we looked at pretty seriously. They don't do bidirectional communication or on the P20s yet. It's coming down the road is what I've been told. I hope I'm not over-promising there. But far as the Flash, it's kind of funny. The last time I was at VMware, I didn't go to 09, but 08, that week we were getting seriously moving over to VDI for our next phase, actually, our internal customer service. And that's the week that our executives decided that they needed to start doing everything on Flash for all their presentations. So instead of having our quarterly meetings with our executives, they would just send out a Flash video. So that kind of put a huge kink in everything, but luckily the P20 solved that. It has helped tremendously. We do not see the takeaways that we were seeing before. That was the benefit that we're really seeing today. So, to answer your question, or yeah.
Yes.
Aditya, do you want to share your point of view?
Yeah, I think I agree with what was said there. I think we've been doing it for a while. I think about 2 or 3 years now, and I would agree that about 20% TCO, 3 to 20%. We would say, I would argue that we would see more. And the point here is that it's an ongoing model. You have to start, and then as you go along, you will gather more cost benefits, which will ultimately reduce your TCO. It's not a flat line, right? It doesn't start at 20%, stays there. If you start looking at it and saying, if I was doing this and I had not done my VDI solution today, where would my costs be, right? Because you'll also see that you will start benefiting from new architectures that are now possible once you move your user base to a VDI-based desktop, right? And we've seen a lot of that happening where people are now coming back with new ideas and saying, how can we, do things more efficiently, more in a different way? Right now, we are trying to catch up with what the users are doing today, right? So you're saying it's very difficult to take away once you give them something. There are users now where it's difficult to take away a VDI desktop. And so we are seeing that and saying that, and I think there was last week a comment from one of the execs in saying that, hey, you know what? I don't even use my other device. I mean, my desktop runs so fast. I mean, it doesn't compare to any other desktop or laptop or anything like that. So there is that experience, and you will see that transition happening, but you have to take it through the transition, right? You have to work with the users, and you will see that happening, and you will say, oh, let's listen to the people, and you will see them making those comments in the corridors, as you go along and saying, this is really good. I can do anything anywhere, and it's the same desktop. I'm going to have the same software installed 10 times here. And so we've kind of matured it to a large extent in ourselves, and not that we don't still have any issues with it. Yes, we do have some challenges like you've all pointed out, and we are working on those too. But together with the users, we have found ways to make the experience and say, okay, these are the limitations, but hey, here's the things which are more exciting, and then give you the benefits. And it's a selling process, and ultimately you'll see that your TCO will be even more in terms of the returns.
Okay. Thank you, Aditya. Wise, we like to call that drinking our own champagne, otherwise known as eating your own dog food, right? But we are true believers of this way of working, and it's deployed, worldwide, as Aditya was alluding to, and all users are, on a virtual desktop of some shape or form using one or another thin client from Wise. So, Carl, looks like we have a quite happy set of customers here for what we heard so far. So, what would you tell them?
Yeah, so I agree with what Mark stated. That was, a really good description of what TCO versus ROI is, and how you have to look at desktop computing as a whole as you move toward a VDI environment. Quite honestly, over the last couple of years, I think all of us collectively in this industry got a little bit spoiled and complacent and expected the same type of ROI we saw with server virtualization, and you really looked at it from a capital cost. And over the last couple of years, people tried to do that on the desktop side, and you couldn't get there. The cost of storage, the back-end infrastructure for the x86 server architectures really drove this to a price point that just wasn't compelling for people. But as people more and more move down this path and this journey around VDI, people are starting to look at it from a TCO perspective. And there's a lot of different angles you can talk about in terms of TCO. We've seen some of our customers, especially in the healthcare vertical, where they start to look at TCO in terms of, security and compliance, and they actually put a dollar associated with what it is from a savings perspective to lock down their data in their data center, as opposed to having it out there on their end user devices and being very mobile. So I just really encourage you to think about TCO holistically, not focus on infrastructure. With that being said, I will tell you, and you'll hear a lot of this, this week at the conference, there clearly is a reduction happening pretty quickly, even on the capital expense to support VDI in the future. The cost of storage is coming down. Moore's Law is real. It continues to be real. More cores in these x86 servers. These 4 pieces of tin that are being brought to market allow you to condense more and more virtual machines per physical asset. The price of storage is going down, and as convergence happens around compute, network, and storage, we do see the price point dropping on capital. But it's still not enough just holistically to look at it from that angle. You got to do a complete TCO, like Mark said. As far as VMware, I believe right now we're roughly we're eating some of our own dog food. We haven't ate the whole bowl yet, but we have roughly 20 to 30% of our infrastructure on View and VDI. I know from my organization, which is very mobile, we are going to start to aggressively deploy 4.5 because of the online-offline capabilities that we'll have. I know for someone like myself who's on the road 70% of the time, I need to be able to check out my desktop and take it and be mobile and check it back in when I land. So I can tell you it's a really rich feature that we're bringing out here this week. And as that becomes more pervasive, and we've obviously tested the hell out of it, we'll be deploying it and actually rolling it out, not just to our corporate folks where the majority of our VDI implementations are, but we'll move it to the field folks as well.
Thank you, Carl. John, you look like you were ready to ask a question, but did I read your body language wrong? Or?
And you're going to yell at me for the ROI discussion, but when I try to get the money to, make 1,000, 2,000 desktops, right now when I submit a infrastructure request, that form doesn't have TCO on it. It has ROI. So how do I quantify, when we acquire a small company and I can get them up and running in a week on VDI, how do I quantify that? How do I quantify, having my executives be able to use their iPads and walk wherever they want because they have their Wise Pocket Cloud, and be productive. That's where I'm struggling from a cost perspective.
And you're not alone. I will tell you that most customers I speak to regarding their implementations of hosted desktops ends when the purchase order hits a finances guy's desk. Without question, most customers spend somewhere between 1.4 to 1.7 times more in CapEx to do hosted desktops as compared to PCs. And so if the argument is going to be made, again, on financial consideration for what you need to spend, you're going to find a very tough road. What customers are doing to successfully get through that is creating value propositions that go beyond PC computing. You can call it end-user computing if you wish. You could talk about things like business continuity and redundancy of users, the ability to be completely fluid and flexible in your work style. What's the value to acquiring another company, right, in terms of time to market to get new apps out there? And so these kind of concepts are ones that most customers don't think about when you do PC computing, right? It does Word, Excel, email. That's the extent. But you need to translate the tools to the use case to actually find the value. And the customers that do that well, right? Banking and finance. A lot of customers on Wall Street, New York, Boston, in Germany, all over the world. Banking, finance, it's around security and compliance. I have customers in the healthcare industry for again, compliance reasons, that having patient data on a distributed device, even if that device is a desktop PC locked away behind a nurse's workstation, is still viewed more risky than with inside the data center. We have customers who do it for business continuity purposes, right? That they're in these parts of the world, whether it be Louisiana or parts of Florida where they have tidal waves and typhoons and all kinds of things going on, that from a compliance point of view, that the ability to move information and data and workers independent of their location is a good thing. Right? How do you quantify that? I don't know if you can. It's like, what's the value of flood insurance? Right? You pray that you never need it, but when you need it and have it, it's a great thing. And so you need to establish metrics and value statements that go way beyond just the investment required. Unfortunately, like Carl was saying, we're coming out of an era when virtualization is tagged to a direct benefit from a CapEx savings that we saw on servers. I would argue that server virtualization not only was a hit, not only a home run, but it was a grand slam. Every organization that I know of has done something with it and have done great results. But it's that legacy of perception of virtualization that is really turning to be a boat anchor around the desktop because customers are expecting the same kind of result. And you can't go there. You can't go there. So to answer your question, John, when you look at devising a method for establishing value way beyond TCO, needs to go there, right? It's the ROI that really sells within the customers that we're speaking to. And it can be done.
Yeah, just to follow up on that, Mark, we see the ROI challenges with VDI implementations, but very similar to what we saw, 6, 7, 8 years ago with server virtualization, there is a cultural barrier which you must overcome as well when you move to a VDI environment. So to echo what Mark's saying, you got to make sure you have a business benefit for the end user as to why they need to move towards a VDI or virtualized desktop. Because they're ultimately the people who you have to win over from that cultural barrier, just like we had to win over probably many of you, on the server side. We used to call you folks the server huggers who didn't want to let go of their physical servers and move to an environment where applications would cohabitate on a single machine. So that cultural barrier is something that we work hard with our customers on and try to build value propositions that will actually enhance their life and give them a business benefit when they give up their PC or their desktop and move to a thin client architecture with someone like Weiss.
Okay. There is one other set of economic arguments that we haven't discussed yet that is probably worth mentioning, and I know we'll talk about it at great length on Wednesday in the cloud session that we're doing. But the idea is relying on a different set of economics around how you actually make this affordable. And the idea is delivering this as a cloud-based service through a third party or some other way. That somehow if you can change the economics on how things are financed and paid for, that fundamentally it may become more affordable to clients to look at desktop computing, desktop as a service, a VDI implementation that you may not own, that is owned elsewhere, but is more as a subscription-based approach. That this is a complete, you think desktop virtualization is still somewhat immature. This is just on the very cusp of beginning to walk if it's a human being. Right? And so we think a lot of activity is going to happen in the desktop services arena that will make desktop as a service very viable and quite honestly affordable as well.
If I may, and having listened to both points, one of the things that at this point, and I'm talking from the standpoint of having been doing virtualization easily for the past 6 to 8 years now, it doesn't take much to convince me as a VDI user, quite frankly, that there's a benefit to be had in putting all my content in the data center such that if I lose my laptop, I'm not putting intellectual property at risk. So I get it. And I think many of us in this audience get it. Now, what I want to know, though, is VMware, is Weiss, do you have any outreach plans into finance? Because ultimately, these are the folks that, if I might say so, might prevent, well, not so much prevent, but not allow us to go as fast as we would like. So if anybody can speak to that, what are the plans to educate the dollars and cents side of the house, basically? Thank you.
Okay. Carl, you're going to become a bank.
Yeah. So what we've done, actually, we've leveraged the partnership with Gartner, who builds very good, quite honestly, TCO models, and we have a desktop TCO model that has worked very well for us with customers and specifically the financial stakeholders and accounts. The reason that we really like using this tool is because it's a tool. And it's not VMware plugging in our numbers, it's you plugging in your numbers. But even at that, you still have to get people to believe in some of the softer benefits and the cost benefits of VDI. Because if you put in there reduction in system administration and service desks and trouble tickets and all of that, you're still going to have to financially sell that internally to your CFO. So I actually think we have a great tool. We plug in everything you would ever want to, cost justify and then some on the desktop. But at the end of the day, it does come down to how you run your business internally and what the CFO in his office looks at from a cost perspective. And those who look at it, through different lenses can help accelerating it, like the healthcare environment, the financial services, where they actually, quite frankly, in some cases it's a break even, or it may even cost more. But when they look at the protection of the intellectual property being locked down in their data center, being replicated across their storage arrays, they actually very quickly say, break even or even more, in the end I'm ahead. And so we have tools, and we've leveraged, again, our partnership with Gartner that you can have. We give it, it's free of charge. Obviously, it only drives more deployment, so we'd encourage you to look at that.
Thank you.
If from a WISE perspective, WISE has also invested on creating ROI tools for customers to use. We take the ROI approach a step further by adding the endpoint, right, compared to some of the work done by VMware, if you're familiar with their ROI tool. In our case, we also add the endpoint, so you can estimate the cost on that. And by adding the endpoint, we also incorporate another variable, which is the energy consumption, right? So that's another area where some of our customers have expressed that, just purely on the energy consumption, they have been able to justify the implementation of VDI. We had experiences that using that tool and through the outcome and information that came out of that tool, customers have been able to determine that energy savings going with a thin client are in orders of magnitude to justify the investment. And also, we had customers in Europe who, through a process of consolidating offices, came up out of the determination that they would not have more than 100 watts of energy allocated per desktop environment, right? And with that allocation of energy, a PC, traditional PC as we know them, impossible to even deploy that. Forget about it, all the other components. So the energy aspect of saving, going with a thin client, also came to play in justifying the ROI and the investment. So again, I went into a practical example, but we also have tools, and we have also done outreach and supporting the IT department on the deployment, and also into the process of working with the finance department, right? So we are very cognizant of the challenges. First, the finance department, purchasing department, and then from there also the end users, right? I'm trying to do an outreach of why, this is as good as or better than what you used to have before. So a lot of things from a WISE side also in support of this. Okay. I wanted to ask, for Joe and Wes, we'll stick on this topic of, overcoming the obstacle of convincing the internal, constituencies of going with a desktop virtualization. So you have a healthcare. So in my mind, one word comes to the justification: security. So I want to, maybe you can share how you play this internally in your organization.
Sure. Well, I'll have to tell you, first of all, our CIO, which is now switched to our COO, he's a tech geek, so it was easy to sell it to him. He always wants the latest and greatest tool or toys in our environment. We were the first Blade environment. We were so it was natural from that perspective. So that helped. Who's selling that to your CFO helps quite a bit. But from the security perspective, we're heavily regulated. We have state regulation. We have federal regulation. And we, of course, now have a credit card regulation, PCI. So we have nurses that actually do, go to actual hospitals. And we haven't gone to that, but that's where we're headed, is looking at, WISE laptops so that we can not have any of that health protected information on there. HIPAA came out in 2002, and now HIPAA High Tech just came out, and the fines are much higher now than they were, and it actually even goes down to the individual. I could be liable if I let HIPAA out of our company, which changed. So from the security perspectives on that, yeah, it's huge to be able to not say, I started this off saying we don't want to give takeaway, but we do have to take away sometimes the ability to be able to put data and transmit it and get that locked down. And this has helped tremendously in those arenas.
Have you been able to actually quantify that?
I would not say no. It is very difficult. I mean, we can essentially take the statutes and say, look, how much it's going to cost us. I mean, it's per member, multiple.
Okay.
I mean, that's what we're talking about here. And we have to notify media. If we do more than 500, if HIPAA is released for more than 500 members at one given time, we have to notify the media. So, I mean, it's very hard to quantify, having bad press or having to pay huge fines, which equates to the same thing. So,
thank you. Wes, how did you address this inside your Lit TV? How did you convince finance and your management?
Basically, our executives are gadget geeks, just like at your company. They like the Mac computers, the iPhones, the iPads. Whenever those first come out, they are some of the first ones to have it. Immediately, they show up at the engineers and hand it to us and say, "Make this work." And we say, "Okay, thank you. I'll need one to play with if I'm going to support you." That was one way that we sold them. The executives actually were the quickest to adapt to the VDI. They embraced it fully, which actually surprised me. They are one of the ones, like you were talking about earlier, that you would have to pry their VDI from their cold dead hands now. If they can run around with their iPad, running Windows 7, working on their office stuff, they love that. When they can work from home or somewhere else on their desktop and then come right in and pick right where they left off in a meeting room, with a V10L in a meeting room with their PowerPoint presentation that they just closed from their desk. That's great. As far as the security and selling on it, we have PCI compliance that we have to deal with. We have to lock those networks down to where not just anyone can access them. The way we go about doing that is with VDI. We've got the desktops that can access the card holder environment. All of those are in the data center, and the way we limit access to that is we have the virtual desktops. Wise Thin Client, anything like that, we manage who has access to those virtual desktops through VMware View. They can access those from home or from work. They can access it with their Mac. They can access it with a PC, a thin client. However, they can work from their own device, but they're still compliant with PCI. That was one of the ways we're selling it to some of the other departments. Finally, that actually is helping us sell it to some of the other departments.
Interesting. Thank you, Wes. So I came to one conclusion. You need to have a boss who's a techie and get him promoted to COO, and VDI gets approved. Sorry, Mark. Anyway, okay. Just wanted to shift gears to another area topic, in another area in this topic, and usually we get asked this question a lot from a vendor perspective, but it would be interesting for you guys who already deployed this, is to what user community you said is prime for this type of computing, right? So who wants to take the lead?
Well, when we started out with VDI, thinking through it logically, we thought, all right, so we'll start out with the people who are not mobile, people who don't, basically desktops, desktop replacement for admins, that kind of stuff. And in reality, what happens very quickly is the executives hear about it, and before long, you're doing VDI with executive level constituents who will bring you, as was mentioned previously, the iPads, the iPhones, whatever Android puts out as a tablet, and expect you to make it work. So yeah, there's that part to it too. contractors, acquisitions, mix it all, very easy, as use cases. But yeah, that's.
Did you do a specific analysis of saying these are my type of users, and here I have 2 buckets, 3 buckets, 10?
Yeah. Well, at first, the initial temptation was to do a one-size-fits-all, and very quickly you find out that there are very unique requirements. Like even now, we're starting to talk with research and development organizations, and we don't have the specific sizing yet. But one thing we do know is what they will need would be drastically different from what the administrative only user would need. So yeah, they all go together. Okay.
Joe, you want to share?
Yeah. From as far as what users we chose first, the ones that made the most logical sense from us was the work-at-home user first, and that was because they already had all those remote connectivity issues anyway. They were already used to not being able to do multimedia or peripherals and things like that, so it wasn't a takeaway from their perspective. The ones that are the hardest are, really some of the diehard IT developers, things like that. They just want lots of processors on their desktop and leave me alone. So those are the more difficult. We haven't tried to push this on anyone because we found that that's just, that's a recipe for guaranteeing to, resist it. But I do agree with, if you offer up some of the additional benefits. As far as you're talking about how to figure out which users are better, we started using a lot of the analytics on that, looking at, we collect statistics on each user and go that direction. You brought up the soft phones and things like that. Customer service has been very difficult when it comes to work at home. We're trying to push more and more people home. We're trying to get down to a smaller footprint on office space. And that one's challenging. Right today with the phones, we're doing more of a POTS line with the call center going that route. Because even when the concern I have, and I know I'm getting technical, is that the PC over IP, even when it can do bidirectional calls, you still can't guarantee that service between point A and point B. So, yeah, okay. Yeah. So that's
all right.
Yep.
And on that same note too, so we kind of went into our POC with, best guess assumptions, if you will. So now that we're starting to talk about scaling this into the mid to high thousands, we find it incumbent upon us to actually do a better job with the analytics, as was mentioned. And with that, we're starting to, we went with the tool of choice recommended by VMware's professional services, Stratosphere from Liquidware Labs, which is a phenomenal tool, best as I've seen so far, that actually does a deep collection of what's happening on physical desktops, virtual desktops even. So we're counting on that, on the outcome of this ongoing engagement to really give us a really good sense of how we're going to size different types of desktops. So.
Thank you. Aditya, you want to quickly share what type of users at Wise are?
Yeah, sure. So at Wise, like we said, we like to drink our champagne, eat the whole bowl when possible, or, I think we almost finished it now. But we've been doing this for a while. It's not something which, started for us 2 years, 3 years back. It's a culture for us, right? And a lot of times when we look at TCO, for example, a TCO for us was we were running physical terminal server session-based RDP sessions. We virtualized them on ESX. We went from 15 boxes to 3 ESX servers. We got a TCO on a desktop, not necessarily an end-user desktop as you would define it, but nevertheless it was a TCO for us, right? That was much higher and much more flexible in terms of how we were doing things. So from an end-user standpoint, from a task worker standpoint, we've been doing this for a while. So that's pretty much, things that we've been going on, and we are improving those, adding more capabilities, making it more flexible, giving them the latest and greatest, and seeing how we take them through the life cycles of new productivity tools on the desktops and things. The most recent one was, over the last year and a half, was more on the development R&D side, and I have two people at the back there. I can see them who are day-to-day users for it. And that was one of the big, targets for us over the last year and a half. And we were able to achieve that through, pretty much self-service using Virtual Center and some of the very fundamental tools available with ESX and virtualization management, with Wisden clients on the other side, allowing us to actually use our own products, make our products better for you guys, make sure that they work with our partner products, and deliver what we are looking for, and be more innovative in the day-to-day use.
Mark, what will be your official answer on type of users?
So most customers today focus on the low-hanging fruit when picking their users. Workers that are statically defined, worker styles that don't deviate a whole lot, and desktops that tend to be locked down. When you go beyond that scope, whether it be mobile workers, engineers, contractors, knowledge workers, that the requirements of those use styles today are still problematic from an implementation point of view to get it right. Not saying that it's impossible, but clients that I speak to have a real hard time figuring out how to allocate the right type of configuration to allow that desktop to be as flexible as a traditional PC is at reasonable cost. You can most certainly do it with static VMs, but when you do static VMs, all of a sudden cost structure behind storage starts to go through the roof. And so there's a balance at play. And again, the customers that I speak today are really focused on the ones that they know that they can hit right out of the way and get it done out of the way early in their implementations.
Thank you. Carl, what would VMware say with regards to what users are good for this?
So as I said earlier, most of them are the static users at our corporate headquarters, but we are, looking to more aggressively deploy it in field operations. We also have, over 1,000 people in India right now, and a lot of them are developers. And it's our own IP, and they work for us, but we still like to be a little bit secure and lock it back down in Palo Alto. So we have a lot of users out of India leveraging, your terminals and VDI back at corporate.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. So, John, you weren't ready to?
No,
okay.
I'm good.
So we have a few more minutes, and I wanted to open up for the audience to ask questions. So if you have any questions, feel free to come to the microphone. So we have somebody there. Yeah.
Question based on what you said, Mark. We're a major medical center in New York City, and we don't have VDI, and we have traditional desktops, servers, et cetera. And for us to make the switch to VDI, we have to be sure that the VDI desktops are going to perform just as good as right. And if it performs worse, then that's terrible. Our management's going to be upset. The users are going to be upset. Why are we spending all this money to do this? So basically, for everyone who has done this, what is the biggest infrastructure requirement in order to successfully do it? Is it super duper servers?
Storage.
What about network bandwidth? We're between 100 megs and 1 gig on the internal network.
What kind of applications are you planning to run there?
Well, we have the biggest hospital application is called Epic, with electronic medical records, all that stuff. I mean, that's...
So I've heard mixed results around Epic specifically to the clients that I've spoken in healthcare. Those that are more advanced with heavy-duty imaging and multimedia as part of that implementation, quite honestly, have a hard time building enough infrastructure to make it work like a traditional desktop.
Why doesn't it work? Is it the network bandwidth?
No. It's a matter of issue of affordability, right? So when you deal with heavy workloads that tax any kind of processor, you put those workloads in a shared environment, the performance of that tends to be less than what you got in a standalone workstation.
That's my point.
Yeah. But you can always reduce the number of users per server, right? 5 users per server may not make great economics, but performance will rock, right? So there's different ways that you have to balance this out.
Right. But is 5 users buying a server for 5 users worth just giving each user a desktop?
Yeah, so I don't know if there's a right answer there. I mean, some customers will say yes. I've spoken to healthcare who have actually done it, and they don't do it for financial reasons, but they do it for business continuity, for productivity, for security and compliance. Different set of reasons that sit behind that.
I think Joe has.
Yeah, I wanted to point out, since you're a hospital, I just was on a local panel that we talked about on hospitals. And what kind of worker are you talking about? Are you talking about your doctors or physicians going from room to room? Or are you talking about nurses? What kind of user community are you talking about supporting?
Every user in our hospital uses a computer. Nurses use kiosks right by the bedside. They use those. They would perhaps make good candidates for VDI. But it's performance, it's our network, it's the servers, one server for 5 people. I mean, that's
right.
big
The applications, it's kind of tough to answer your question on like bandwidth and things like that because it's the type of application. Is it very heavy or not? But what I was going to point out is the example I was at, we had one of our hospitals on the panel, and he was saying that doctors just love it now with electronic data where they're trying to get to. They're using iPads and being able to go from room to room with the same machine all the time. And the iPad isn't going to support those applications, but it's a huge benefit from their perspective. They were quantifying the amount of time it was taking for the doctor to use a kiosk and log in and wait for it to get that login session time and then to be able to work and go from room to room. Just that time and savings alone was huge. That was able to give 2 or 3 more patients they could see each day is what they were quantifying. So it depends on the type of users, what I was kind of curious about.
We'll be here to continue answering your question. Let's move to the next one.
Hi, I've got kind of a 2-part question. One is, in order to derive maximum benefit from VDI or desktop virtualization in general, you really need to separate the persona from the desktop. Can you each talk about some of what you've done in that respect? And then the second part of the question is, I mean, you've all been speaking about VDI. Did you consider terminal services or other options for desktop virtualization during your project, and what made you make the decision for VDI as opposed to the other alternatives?
Persona management, profile management, if you want to call it that too, we quickly realized that was a problem that needed to be solved. One of the most attractive benefits to doing VDI is the fact that the link clone technology, we see it and we think, oh wow, patch once and roll it out to everybody and that's it. And of course, when you look a little deeper, you start to realize, oh, wait a second, this is really no different from ghosting a machine and giving an updated image and go, here you go. User's going to say yes, all well and good. What happened to the picture on the desktop? What happened to my IE favorite? So yeah, it's a huge problem for us, and I can tell you this, we don't have it fully solved yet. Right now, we're looking at traditional Microsoft roaming profiles. We're also looking at third-party profile solutions. The ones that immediately come to mind are RTO, RES, Profile Unity from Liquidware Labs. So yeah, so as we look to, pretty much everything we've done today is all like, it's not solved. We're still struggling very deeply with that. So, but again, lots of options from different vendors that purport to address that. Okay. Does that? It's not a full answer, but at least that's how we're dealing.
On your terminal services question, customers come to us and say we've tried apps on terminal services or XenApp or presentation server, and then fundamentally the usability of the application doesn't work. So it's the number one issue as to why customers don't use more terminal services is that the compatibility of PC-based apps in a server environment is not completely ubiquitous, that there's differences that exist enough where the app will actually break. And the amount of work to remediate a bad app can be pretty sizable depending on the app. So the issue for most customers that I speak to about why they don't run terminal services is the fact that getting from a PC-based infrastructure to a server-based one is really tough to do, and that if you just virtualize a VM is a VM is a VM, Windows doesn't know any differently, and the app will run unmodified without any issue.
Okay.
Hello.
Next. Okay.
I have a question around support, and it's kind of twofold also, but they're both related to support. One is, you talked about having an engineer, admin, and service desk type levels. The first part of the question is, did you change any of those roles when you migrated to VDI? And number two is, the concept of using VDI is to reduce support. So if you reduce support, and I'm just going to throw a number out there, it doesn't have to be right, say by 50%, what are you doing with those other staff that you were answering support calls? Did you reduce staff, or did you assign them to other tasks within your company?
So, yes, there is a change, and there's like I think Carl mentioned some time back about a cultural change about the users. There's also a slight cultural change for IT itself, right? In terms of what I dub as an enterprise help desk. From becoming a regular help desk person, you're now more of an enterprise help desk. I mean, you're looking at help desk coming from the server side, right, from the data centers. What we found is, other than cross-training on the new tools and how to deploy and the technologies, the basic desktop, and it's if you're installing something on a Windows 7 desktop, it doesn't necessarily change, right, from a day-to-day standpoint. So how IE is going to act or react or do things, those skill sets remain the same. They don't change.
Right.
It's the questions about how the desktop gets to the end user on the screen, which is the new part, right? And we do have even today, as things change, it's a continuous process. It's not that you do it one time and you're done with it, right? You have to keep, as new technologies come out, the profiles issue here and talking about we're using roaming profiles today with a lot of scripting and group policies, looking at new tools as they come out and technologies evolve to make it even better. So yes, there will be a continuous process going forward, but we were able to cross-train our help desk staff to manage the same desktops remotely or from a more convenient standpoint.
Well, I cannot speak much to the staff reduction part, but from a skill set standpoint, as the engineer who put a huge chunk of our VDI infrastructures together, one of the things that was an initial struggle was convincing the field support staff that yes, this is virtualization, it lives in the data center, but when you really put all that aside, it's really at the end of the day you supporting the end user, to get them productivity. So yes, there was. I will tell you there was a little bit of resistance. Actually, no, there was a significant amount of resistance. But over time, I continue to work with the field staff. Case in point, as we look to build gold templates for VDI, well, when you talk to somebody who spent a good amount of time, putting ghost images together, once you can just kind of help them over that bump of, virtualization, it is what it is, but we're still supporting desktops. Once you can help them over that, it becomes much easier to work with them and get them doing pretty much their job, just on a different platform. Does that kind of speak to your concerns a little bit, or am I just not getting it?
Yeah, but I'd still like to know, did anybody reduce their staff, or what did those other people do now that they don't have to do support?
Customers who I've spoken to who go forth with business plans to their CIOs and CFOs had the response come back, show me the 20 to 40% headcount reduction, and then we'll fund your project. Point blank, we're going to save money by cutting headcount because these people are no longer here. Or show me new areas in which they're going to provide higher value. That's a much tougher argument to make.
And on that point, we're sending lots and lots more people at home. We can't send a tech around to the city or to the outlying cities out our main Kansas City is where we're based out of. We can't send a tech there. It would take too much time. It's just, there's no way. So as the business wants to be able to send more and more people home, we're saying, well, you're going to have to do self-service. But we want to simplify that as much as possible. So not having a fat desktop at their home to support, and when a hard drive fails or a power supply fails, they simply just drive back in, or we ship them a new device if that would be the case. It may be our hardware VPN device or a monitor or whatever. So they kind of self-service themselves. As far as augmentation, a lot of that staff has been reallocated throughout the company. I mean, either into our help desk or whatever. It does take a higher technical to support the VMware environment. I mean, so a higher paying person is going to have to do that. So there will be some shift change there because of it, of course.
Okay, thank you.
But at the end of the day, pre-VDI, you had somebody who was presumably doing PC templates. In the VDI world, you're still going to need that role. So, so just something to keep in mind.
I think we should also look at it as a lot of times it's not necessarily, it's also aligned to a growth of a business, saying if we are adding more people, we don't have to add more people, right? But we can support more with what we have. And at the same time, you're also providing your help desk employees and your people with a career path, right? I mean, in terms of getting into new technologies and learning new things. So that's usually a very, sort of the thing in terms of skill sets and things.
Thank you.
I know you've been waiting to ask questions, but we're running out of time. And these people are going to be here, so don't go away. I want to wrap this up. Sorry for this. We'll answer your questions immediately after. So you heard a lot about TCO versus ROI. You heard a lot about the user profiles and who's primed for this technology. We hope this was very useful. I would like maybe Carl do some closing words on what you would like to address to your audience here.
There's one point I'd like to make in closing. Going back to the total cost of ownership question, and there's something I've seen very uniquely used in a number of our larger customers to help cost justify their VDI implementation, and no one mentioned it today, is today most people build a common image or a golden image and deploy it on their desktops, and everyone has the same set of applications. We've seen people very successfully reduce their licensing costs when they move to VDI because they do a deep dive analysis of all of the applications that exist and reside on the existing desktops. And what they find is there's a significant portion of user licenses they're paying for that are never being used, but because it's part of the golden image build, they're deploying them. So as they move towards VDI, we have seen a number of people reduce their licensing costs because they don't need as many end user licenses for all the ISV applications that exist out there on the golden image. So just another way to think of it, which is why the TCO model for VDI is very complex. But if you think outside the box, there are absolutely ways to cost justify this new way of providing end-user computing.
Thank you, Carl. So just to finish, I would like to thank our panel, right, with Gartner and VMware, and also all the distinguished common customers between VMware and WISE. So maybe a round of applause for the panel, please. Thank you. Okay.